In 1989, Japan owned the future. 8 of the 10 largest companies on Earth were Japanese. The Imperial Palace grounds in Tokyo were worth more than all the real estate in California. Japanese GDP per capita was 10% higher than America's. Sony, Toyota, Mitsubishi, these weren't just companies. They were empires. And every economist, every analyst, every government on the planet was asking the same question: how do we stop Japan from taking over? That was 37 years ago. Today, Japan's GDP per capita is roughly the same as it was in 1992. Except back then, that number made Japan the second richest country in the world. Today, it puts Japan 40th. Behind Slovenia. Behind Lithuania. Behind countries most people cannot find on a map. But the economy is not what's killing Japan. What's killing Japan is something far more fundamental. Japan is running out of Japanese people. And the mathematics of what comes next are irreversible. This is the Wealth Records, where every video will change how you see money, history, and the systems controlling your life. If this is your first time here, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because what's happening to Japan right now is not just a Japanese problem. It is a preview of what's coming for Germany, Italy, South Korea, China, and eventually the entire developed world. If you're Japanese or living in Japan, tell us in the comments, do you feel this decline in your daily life? We want to hear from people on the ground. To understand why Japan is dying, you first need to understand why it lived. In August 1945, Japan was annihilated. 3 million dead. 40% of homes destroyed. Factories, shipyards, railways, obliterated. The population was starving. The nation that had built one of the most powerful military machines in history was reduced to rubble. And then something extraordinary happened. Something economists still call the Japanese miracle. The Americans, terrified that communism would sweep through Asia, decided to rebuild Japan as a capitalist showpiece. They dismantled the old family conglomerates, the zaibatsu, and redistributed land to farmers, creating a new middle class overnight. They kept the yen artificially weak, making Japanese exports absurdly cheap for American consumers. And when the Korean War erupted in 1950, Japan became the industrial base for American forces. Overnight, Japanese factories were running at full capacity, and American money flowed freely. But America provided the spark. What Japan did next was its own genius. Japan invented a system designed for one purpose: growth at all costs. The Keiretsu, networks of companies that owned each other, supported each other, and made hostile takeovers impossible. Window guidance, where the Bank of Japan quietly directed commercial banks to funnel money into strategic industries. Steel, automobiles, shipbuilding, electronics. And then came Kaizen, the production philosophy born at Toyota, where every employee, from the factory floor to the boardroom, was expected to suggest constant, small improvements. Thousands of tiny optimizations, every single day. The results were staggering. From 1950 to 1973, Japan's economy grew at nearly 10% per year. GDP expanded fourfold in just 15 years. By 1968, Japan had overtaken West Germany to become the second largest economy in the world. Japanese products went from cheap imitations to global standards of quality. Sony replaced American televisions. Toyota and Honda defeated American automakers. Kawasaki replaced American motorcycles. By the 1980s, the world wasn't just admiring Japan. The world was afraid of Japan. When Ridley Scott made Blade Runner in 1982 and imagined Los Angeles in the future, the signs were in Japanese. Giant advertisements showed geishas. Imagining the future meant imagining a world dominated by Japan. And here is the detail that matters most for everything that comes next. This miracle was built on people. A massive, young, educated, disciplined workforce. Millions of workers pouring into factories. millions of consumers buying refrigerators, televisions, and cars for the first time. A population boom that powered 4 decades of uninterrupted growth. Japan's economy was not built on natural resources. It was not built on oil or gold or fertile land. It was built on human capital. And human capital is the one resource that Japan is now losing, permanently. In September 1985, the finance ministers of the world's 5 largest economies met at the Plaza Hotel in New York. The Americans wanted the yen to strengthen. Japan's exports were crushing American industry, and Washington wanted it to stop. Japan agreed. Not because it wanted to, but because it had no choice. Japan depended on the American military umbrella for protection against the Soviet Union and China. Without a significant military since 1945, saying no to Washington was a luxury Japan could not afford. In 2 years, the yen nearly doubled in value against the dollar. A Japanese car that cost an American consumer $4,200 suddenly cost $7,800. Exports collapsed. To save the economy, the Bank of Japan slashed interest rates in half, from 5% to 2.5%, the lowest in the world at the time. The goal was to stimulate industry and consumption. But the money didn't go into factories. It went into speculation, real estate, and the stock market. When everyone buys land, prices rise, which encourages more borrowing, which drives prices higher. Nissan was making more money from financial speculation than from building cars. Banks were lending against land whose value was inflated by their own lending. Nobody wanted to stop the party. And in Japanese culture, a culture of consensus, of not going against the group, nobody did. In 1989, the Bank of Japan was forced to raise rates to contain the overheating. The bubble burst. Between 1990 and 1992, the Nikkei index lost 56% of its value. More than $4 trillion in stock market wealth vanished in less than 2 years. Real estate prices collapsed. And Japan entered a deflationary spiral that it would not escape for over 3 decades. Banks were drowning in bad debts, loans that borrowers would never repay. Nearly 20% of all outstanding credit was worthless. But instead of letting the banks fail and starting over, Japan chose to save face. Zombie banks were kept alive. New loans were given to bankrupt companies just so they could pay interest on old debts. Losses were disguised as assets. And innovative companies were starved of capital. From 1995 to 2025, Japan's nominal GDP fell from $5.5 trillion to $4.3 trillion. Its share of the global economy collapsed from 17.8% to 3.6%. Real wages fell 11%. And GDP per capita, which had been the 3rd highest in the world in 1995, dropped to 40th. Japan didn't just stagnate. Japan went backwards. And it went backwards for a reason that no amount of monetary policy or government spending could fix. Here is the number that defines Japan's future: 705,809. That is how many babies were born in Japan in 2025. The lowest number since records began in 1899. A 10th consecutive record low. And a number that was not supposed to be reached until 2042, arrived 17 years ahead of schedule. Japan's government committed $23 billion over 3 years to boost the birth rate. Expanded child allowances. Subsidized fertility treatments. Workplace reforms. Prime Minister Takaichi called the demographic crisis the country's biggest problem, and established a population strategy headquarters. None of it worked. Because here is what governments never understand about demographic collapse. You cannot legislate people into having children. Japan's fertility rate has fallen to 1.2 children per woman. Replacement level, the rate needed just to keep the population stable, is 2.1. Japan is not even close. And the gap is widening, not closing. Meanwhile, the deaths keep coming. In 2024, Japan recorded 1.6 million deaths against only 686,000 births. The population is shrinking by more than 800,000 people per year. That is the equivalent of losing a mid-sized city every single year. Japan's population peaked at 128.5 million in 2010. Today it stands at approximately 122.5 million. By 2050, projections show it falling below 100 million. By 2070, it will be 87 million. And by the early 22nd century, if current trends continue, Japan's population will fall to 42 million, 1/3 of what it is today. But the total number is not even the worst part. The worst part is the age structure. Japan's median age is now 50.2 years, the highest of any major country on Earth. 30% of the population is over 65. Children aged 0 to 14 make up just 11.2% of the population, the smallest share ever recorded. The average Japanese farmer is 70 years old. 1/3 of construction workers are over 55. The population pyramid has inverted. It is no longer a pyramid at all. It is a coffin. And it gets worse. Because the young people who remain are not having children either. Marriage rates have fallen from over 1 million per year in the 1970s to barely 500,000 today. The average age of a mother at first birth has risen from the mid-20s to 31. Young Japanese cite economic pressures, crushing work hours, the cost of living, and a culture that demands mothers leave their careers. In Japanese culture, the salaryman shows absolute loyalty to his company in exchange for lifetime employment. Companies demand 60 hours a week. Nobody has time for children when the office expects you from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. And despite those brutal hours, Japan ranks 29th in hourly productivity among OECD countries. The Japanese system values visible effort, being present, looking exhausted, not the actual result. Since 2008, over 500,000 young, educated Japanese have emigrated, mostly to Germany, the UK, and the United States. The brain drain is accelerating. The people Japan needs most, the young, the skilled, the ambitious, are leaving because Japan offers them no future. And the people who stay? Some of them disappear entirely. Japan has a word for it, hikikomori. Over 1.4 million Japanese people have withdrawn completely from society. They do not work. They do not study. They do not socialize. They live with their aging parents, some for 10, 20, even 30 years. The social pressure is so overwhelming that they would rather vanish than face the shame of failure. The demographic trap is closing. And there is no escape. Demographics are destiny. And Japan's destiny is written in mathematics that cannot be argued with. Japan's pension system, like most developed countries, is pay-as-you-go. Current workers fund current retirees. In 1990, there were 5.8 Japanese workers for every retiree. Today, there are 2.1. By 2050, the ratio will fall to 1.2, approaching the point where one worker supports one retiree. The mathematics are brutal. Pension spending already consumes a massive share of the national budget. Healthcare spending for the elderly is rising every year. But the tax base is shrinking. Fewer workers means less income tax. Less consumption means less sales tax revenue. The fiscal gap widens every single year. To fill the gap, Japan borrows. Public debt now stands at 237% of GDP, the highest in the world. The Bank of Japan holds nearly half of all government bonds. It is printing yen to buy the debt of its own government. A central bank is supposed to be a neutral institution managing a currency, not the country's largest creditor. But it gets worse. The Bank of Japan also owns roughly 7% of the Japanese stock market. It is buying stocks with money that did not exist the day before. This is unprecedented in any developed economy. Japan's working-age population peaked in 1995 at 87 million. By 2024, it had fallen to 73.7 million, a loss of over 13 million workers. By 2040, projections show it falling below 60 million. That is a 20% reduction in the workforce in just 16 years. Fewer workers means businesses cannot find employees. Schools are closing. Hospitals in rural areas cannot find doctors. Small and medium companies are shutting down, not because they're unprofitable, but because there is literally no one left to work. And then there is the physical evidence. Japan now has over 9 million abandoned homes, called IKEA. That is 14% of the entire housing stock. Empty houses, empty shops, crumbling infrastructure. Villages with fewer than 10 residents. Towns where life-size dolls have been placed to replace the people who left. By 2038, projections indicate 1 in 3 Japanese homes will be vacant. Japan is not just losing people. Japan is losing towns, industries, tax revenue, and economic capacity. The physical infrastructure of the country is being abandoned, neighborhood by neighborhood, prefecture by prefecture. And the one solution that could slow the decline, immigration, is the one solution Japan refuses to accept. Every economist knows what Japan needs. More workers. More young people. More immigration. But Japan is a culture built on consensus, homogeneity, and an almost sacred resistance to outside influence. For 220 years, from 1633 to 1853, Japan sealed itself from the world under a policy called Sakoku, the locked country. Today, Japan is no longer legally closed. But the culture tells a different story. Only 17% of Japanese people have a passport. Most Japanese are born in Japan, live their entire lives in Japan, and will never travel outside Japan. This cultural identity rests on pillars the Japanese consider immutable. Gamen, endure without complaining. Wages stagnate, and everyone grits their teeth together. But if everyone endures in silence, no one demands change. Shikata jie nai, that's the way it is, there's nothing we can do about it. A fatalism so deep it becomes an excuse not to try. Tate May, always save face, even if it means burying problems and postponing reforms. And Wa, the harmony of the group, which must never be disrupted. Taking initiative in Japan is punished. If it is not written in the process, you check with the boss. Suggesting a better way is met with, "Well done for finding this solution, but just do it the usual way, please." This philosophy shapes politics too. Over a quarter of the population is now over 65. Older people vote at far higher rates than younger people. So politicians respond to their demands. Pensions are protected. Healthcare is geared towards seniors. Resources that could go to young families, to childcare, to building a future, go instead to maintaining the past. This is the silver democracy. Older people vote in their own interest. Politicians favor them. Young people disengage from political life. And the cycle deepens. Japan does not need an economic reform. Japan needs a cultural revolution. And Japanese culture is specifically designed to prevent revolutions. Japan is not an outlier. Japan is a preview. South Korea's fertility rate is 0.7, even worse than Japan's. Italy is at 1.2. Germany is at 1.4. China has dropped below 1.1. Every major developed economy and most middle-income economies are on the same trajectory. The only difference is timing. Japan is simply 20 years ahead. It hit the demographic cliff first. And it is showing the world exactly what happens when a rich, advanced, technologically sophisticated country runs out of young people. The economy stagnates. Debt explodes. Innovation slows. The pension system cracks. Rural areas empty out. Housing is abandoned. The workforce shrinks. And the political system, captured by an aging electorate, becomes incapable of reform. For most of human history, economic growth was virtually non-existent. A medieval peasant lived much like his great-grandfather. The idea that economies should grow 2 to 3% every year is a fairly recent invention, an invention powered by population growth and young workers entering the labor force. When that engine stops, everything built on top of it begins to collapse. And no amount of monetary policy, no amount of quantitative easing, no amount of government spending can replace the one thing an economy actually needs: people. Japan built the most extraordinary economic miracle in modern history. It rose from total destruction to global dominance in a single generation. And it did it with the one resource that mattered most: its people. Now that resource is disappearing. Not because of war. Not because of famine. Not because of any external enemy. But because of choices, cultural, economic, and political, made over decades, whose consequences are now irreversible. Like Icarus, Japan flew too close to the sun. It burned its wings. But unlike Icarus, Japan did not crash. It entered a slow, silent descent, still beautiful, still functioning, still admired, but falling, steadily, toward a future with fewer people, fewer workers, fewer children, and fewer towns with anyone left in them. History doesn't repeat. But if you don't understand it, it will crush you all the same. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. The Wealth Records. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.